they have to be disciplined. Now, this is something that maybe you wouldn't really pay too much attention to on site because when they come to work, but when people are working remotely, you're looking for a new set of competencies. In addition to the competencies to carry out the work, there's a certain level of discipline that someone has to have. And that's why you would also hear maybe some firms struggle with entry-level workers working remotely. It's obviously a strategy. But guess what? It's not just about the workspace. It's about the work being meaningful. So meaning work, one thing that came up a lot.
So welcome to the Borderless Productivity Podcast. I'm your host, Chuma Chukudama, and here we delve into conversations with leaders, innovators, reshaping how we work. Each episode is packed with insights to help you boost your productivity and make an impact, no matter where you are. So let's unlock new ways to achieve more together. I'm really pleased because today we have a really special guest. Her name is Adora Ikwuemesi. She's the founder of Kendor Consulting, an award-winning HR expert with over 15 years of experience in HR transformation and leadership development. With a doctorate in business administration focused on remote work management or remote work engagement, she brings deep expertise in enhancing workforce motivation. Her extensive work in public and private HR sector projects makes her an ideal guest for this maiden episode of this podcast. And we're going to be talking today about enhancing remote worker engagement. So thank you and welcome, Adora.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chuma.
I'm really excited to be doing this because we've been talking about this for forever.
I know. And congratulations. I'm so excited that you finally done it.
Yes. You know, I mean, I've known Adora for a while, and she's one of the most committed HR consulting experts that I know of, and I'm really glad that you here with us today. So, in this episode of the Borderless Productivity Podcast, I want to explore this crucial topic of enhancing remote worker engagement. With the global rise of remote work, keeping teams motivated has been, you know, a big topic and a challenge that a lot of organizations are facing. My organization, for example, we were on site up till the pandemic, and we went remote, and we've never come back since. And personally, I know I'm really looking forward to this discussion because we faced all kinds of challenges, and I'm sure a lot of companies that's out there are still facing those kinds of challenges. So we're going to be looking at that. We want to understand what it's, because really, engaged workers, you know, bring about loyalty, they bring about productivity, and it directly impacts the organization's ability to remain competitive in the very competitive landscape today. So we want to delve into practical strategies, and we're going to be asking you a lot of questions. I hope you are ready for us today.
I am.
Yes. All right. So let's start by even asking you, what inspired this journey into this field, and what keeps you really passionate today, Adora?
Okay, good. Very good question. I love that question. So I remember, obviously one of the reasons why we're discussing this topic, because this is the topic of my research for the last 3 years, remote work engagement. And obviously I've been in the field of human resources management for years. When the pandemic hit, we all, just like you said, your firm moved to fully remote, and you've never really looked back.
Yeah.
One thing it's funny because there's a personal side to it. Yeah. Of course, I've been consulting for years. My specialty is human resources management. I've always been interested in the area of engagement from a personal level and obviously an organizational level. On a personal level is being a worker myself. I remember starting my career and obviously realizing that I wasn't always motivated, right? And I wanted to know more. I wanted to obviously enhance my own performance. I wanted to know, what can I do to be a better employee? What can I do to really contribute better in the field of work? And that got me very interested in psychology. So very early in my career, I started to delve into psychology, but psychology of people.
in terms of what motivated people to perform better. I was looking for solutions for myself, really, to improve my own capacity, my own productivity, and my own even well-being in terms of mental well-being, because I realized that there was a connection between the way I felt about work and, how well I did in work. But fast forward anyway to 2022, I've always been very interested in research. Of course, as a consultant, I've always done a certain level of research, but I decided to challenge myself personally and intellectually by proceeding for a doctoral research. And this led me to, of course, picking your research topic. And I don't know whether it was the pandemic. I knew I was going to do engagement.
Yeah.
Right? I knew that engagement would be there.
Yeah.
But I don't know, sometimes you don't know whether it's like divine orchestration or something. I don't know how remote work entered the mix. But at the time, I was working remotely because, you see, the funny thing is I already started a topic on engagements and careers. And then somehow, while working remotely during the pandemic, I just said, no, I think I've always enjoyed working remotely, personally. I started my consulting career in 2004. Of course, then I went out, left consulting, went into industry, and then, of course, came back, founded a company in 2009. But I remember having, when I'm doing certain kind of work, like reports, I would ask my manager to stay home, right? Because I just felt like when I'm doing this kind of work, I'm more effective when I'm working at home. I realized that there's certain type of work that just works better in a remote environment. Anyway, we all were working remotely, and I just thought, to myself, engagement is a big issue for lots of organizations. We were still grappling engagement, and now we have to work remotely. Now we need to figure out engagement in remote work, because if a lot of firms are going to be working remotely, and we were still struggling with engagement issues when we were on site, we need to look at engagement when people are working remotely, because ultimately that is how a lot of us are going to work. And if we don't understand it, because it's a phenomenon, because it's new, it's emerging, we're still exploring it, then, of course, exploration means mistakes. But if we start looking into the details now, we would have insights that can at least help us. And that was it. So so the last 3 years we're dedicated to find insights. Speaking with people working remotely, speaking with HR professionals, speaking with MDs, so gaining that exploratory research and insight into how can we enhance engagement when people are working remotely, considering that it's a different environment, because it is. The remote work environment is different from the office environment. In the remote work environment, everybody's environment is different. Where you're working from now is very different from where I'm working from now.
Absolutely. And I think
standardizes it. That's the thing. That's one of the biggest factors. Our office is standard. You have standardized it. When we're working remotely, your environment and my environment and everyone in our team's environment is different. Does this have an impact?
Great. In fact, you've actually started. You started answering some of the questions that I was going to ask you.
Yes.
And the truth is that I'm sure a lot of people who are going to be listening to this are really going to be interested in this, because it is a problem.
It is.
And it could make the difference between companies who succeed and companies who fail.
Yeah, sure.
Because if you find yourself in a landscape where it's an unknown, everybody has been thrown into this unknown way of working. If one company is able to find the secret sauce, let me call it that, the remote work, he will definitely have a better engaged workforce and have that huge edge over his competition. So this is really interesting. So I'm going to start by asking that, as someone who consults, you've consulted with various organizations, what are the common trends that you see in how companies are approaching remote engagement? Anything that you have found that is consistent, that helps organizations? Let's start from there.
Okay, so a good thing, one of the things I looked into particularly were strategies that firms were using and individuals were using as well. Because remember that when people are working remotely, there's a huge individual aspect because their work environment is determined by their personal circumstances, right? Yeah. So one thing I've seen, if I say based on personal consultation, like in terms of strategies, a big part of remote work, which is maybe people didn't pay so much attention to, is what I've started mentioning, which is the physical environment. In fact, that was something that really stood out. Right. Yes, because traditional work, it's the big difference between traditional work and remote. The environment has changed, right? Yes. So the environment has changed because it depends on, and when I say environment, there's different contexts from the country it is happening in, right, to the physical environment, which is, the landscape, the workspace in which the work is being conducted. So there's a national context in terms of the country, its own infrastructure, and then there's obviously the personal context, your workspace. And when I say your workspace, work design, your furniture, the noise, the air temperature, like people take these things for granted. In the office, you have air conditioning. In a home, it might be very hot because the person does not have air conditioning. Do these impact work? Yes. Somebody might say, but how is that linked to motivation? If I plan to work today and all of a sudden my internet goes, I'm very hot. Even with my best laid plans, it can change my psychology.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
because I was working and then all of a sudden my electricity was cut out. My internet was just acting up. What happens to your engagement? Yeah, I am internally motivated, but an external factor has affected my productivity.
Correct.
Right. So there is a link between your environment and of course, so there are different aspects of it, but the environmental factor is very, very important because it's the fundamental change between remote and on-site because there's no standardization anymore of the environment. It is now very individualized and personal. Yeah. So that is definitely, so one of the strategies I've seen is people try to change their environment and make it more suitable to be able to work well. There has to be a intentional deliberateness about ensuring your workplace suitability because your work environment has a big impact. So anything you need to do to make work more function, like, to make your workspace better or more conducive for remote work is a strategy. And that could be from ensuring you have good infrastructure, to ensuring you have a good equipment, to ensuring that you have a dedicated space, you have a better chair. So strategies around improving your workspace, right?
So if I hear you well, the HR function of companies can actually adopt these kinds of strategies to when they are hiring remote workers, they will,
of course,
have like checklist of things that
definitely.
That they need to have, and then have some kind of way of ensuring that they get it. Okay,
there has to be policies, for example. Policies help. A lot of the things I've seen from the strategies that I've investigated, policies help. For example, I know of companies who will do a speed check with you first to make sure that the speed on your internet is of a certain level. They will do a check with you first in terms of these are the things, because if those things are not there, no matter your best intentions, I remember we hired someone, and this was really at the beginning of COVID when we were still figuring it out, and even I didn't have these insights. And the person said, I mean, this is very Nigeria specific. Their transformer blew. Right. And that means obviously they didn't have any power supply in their area for 2 weeks, right? I mean, it might sound like, God, so how can you have that kind of problem? But at the time, we didn't really think of the ideas and things. And the person just said, they although they were just supposed to be like a temp, but they couldn't even temp because they couldn't come up with a solution of an alternative work environment. Of course, knowing what I know now, there are different ways that could have been resolved, right? Somehow by finding an alternative place, by working from a cafe, by, there are just so many things that they could have done by getting a power bank or, they could have, but at the time it was just like, no, I don't have the capacity. And that was it. So yes, HR in firms have certain things that need to be in place. They're like their predecessors, their requirements, like their minimum standards. Because if they are not there, then it's going to be difficult, right? So those things need to be available. So strategies around that. And then, of course, there's other strategies, maybe from leadership, because when you lead people remotely, the communication is different, right? There's research that shows that in some cases, the intention to leave is higher when you work remotely because the connection and the trust and the communication is not there, right?
Yeah.
So research has said that, people working in remote teams have a higher intention to leave. So all those factors, we need to intentionally mitigate them. And then, of course, personal discipline is a very big one. It came out high in not just my research, but research of previous research. It's a moderating factor, self-discipline. So if you're looking to recruit people who want to work remotely, they have to be disciplined. Now, this is something that maybe you wouldn't really pay too much attention to on site because when they come to work, they're
Exactly.
But when people are working remotely, you're looking for a new set of competencies. In addition to the competencies to carry out the work, there's a certain level of discipline that someone has to have. And that's why you would also hear maybe some firms struggle with entry-level workers working remotely, not because, maybe some may not have gathered that level. And so you have to look out for it because I've had a situation, I've had someone tell me about a staff of this. The work wasn't getting done. The only way they knew that the person was online was she was always liking all their posts. If not for that, they would have just thought, you know what, maybe is this person really with us? But they knew that she was still, would I say, alive because posts were constantly liked, but the work was just not done.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the person was having difficulty being a self-starter. So you need a different set of rules. It doesn't mean, no. You need to manage people differently. You need to put systems in place. You can't just say, remote work remotely. Nah, it doesn't work for everybody. And that's why companies have tools, systems to manage, although there's a bit of controversy over how far companies go, but there has to be some management. Even people who work remotely admit that they need it. They need the check-ins regularly, right? Because when you work remotely, you don't just say bye, work. No, you have to put systems in place to check in and to ensure that work is done, not micromanaging, but regular check-in. So those are strategies that, firms, there's so many, and I'm sure as we talk, they will.
Absolutely. In fact, this is a good way to pivot into strategies now, right? And you talked about tools that, you initially you were talking about the policies and the that organizations can use. But let's go into innovations that have evolved over the last few years, specifically. So what kind of innovations in your last few years of practice have you come across that have significantly improved remote worker engagement? And let's talk about specific innovations, that one or two that you think made the most impact.
Okay, because there's so many. And I'll talk about, so first thing, before I delve in, I will just talk generally because I know that we're trying to help people with productivity here. So I'm going to tell you the focus areas of the strategies, and then I'll pick the ones that I believe are significant. But I want to give everybody like an overview of all, because I actually developed a framework which focused on strategies. Now, one of the focus areas is lifestyle benefits. Okay. One of the greatest things that remote work has done for people personally, it has allowed them achieve success in other areas of life outside of work.
Interesting.
You can't take that away from people, right? And I call that area lifestyle benefits, right? So it's the benefits it gives to my lifestyle. You understand? The personalized benefits, the wellness it brings, the work-life balance. So that is an area that remote work delves into, in particularly for people, okay? And people appreciate this benefit. And companies have seen that working remotely is a benefit for a lot of people, right? So forget all the issues, that the fact that you can work from home is a benefit. So one of the
big strategies organizations can use, obviously, is that understand that it is a benefit.
Yep.
And people love that benefit.
Exactly.
Why you also hear, that's a different story. The return to work policies are causing kickback.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Absolutely.
they are causing kickback because people are feeling like, you know what, this is so essential that, you know what, I rather not take this job, or I rather resign, or I show my grievance. Why should I come back one more day? So some companies that were with 2 are now asking for come back for 3. Some are saying come back for the 5, and it's causing an issue. So a big strategy is to understand that. So I'll just mention the focus areas very quickly. So the lifestyle benefit, those are areas of strategies that, know that it's a benefit that people appreciate. Technology, because remote work relies highly on technology. Now, you must offer technological support.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
So now it depends on who you're using. Different countries have different technological infrastructure. But remember that technology is also personal. You can have a technology handicap. It is regardless of the technology.
Exactly.
So the infrastructure might be good. You're in the US, you're in the UK, you're in Europe, but you yourself don't have digital ability. You will struggle to work remote. So the technology support is a strategy, right? To equip people with the infrastructure, the tools, the competencies to carry out work. Leadership and management is another strategy because remember, leaders, sometimes some of the issues is coming from leadership. Some leaders are not happy with they think that people should be back. Some leaders think people are not as productive, or they're not as collaborative, or they're losing out on creativity. So we need to invest in leadership development, right? We need to promote positive leadership cultures. So leadership has always been important, but in remote working, it's actually more. Why? Imagine when you can't be face-to-face. It was already difficult to manage when we were in the office.
Correct.
Now, you have to be more deliberate because communication is poorer in the sense that it's less face-to-face. So it needs a different medium. And you know how chatting but it's not the same. So we need to invest in managing remotely because the communication is different. So our leadership development needs to be different. This obviously is related to relationships and communication, right? Then work design is obviously a strategy. But guess what? It's not just about the workspace. It's about the work being meaningful. So meaningful work. One thing that came up a lot, honestly, was a big insight for me. I didn't expect the word fun as a strategy.
Fun. Interesting. Wow. Wow.
I thought work was work. Let's get this work done.
Exactly.
It kept coming up. The fact as a strategy and as something that people wanted work to be. So meaningful work, fun work, right? So firms need to incorporate fun and recreational activities into remote work.
Interesting.
Yes.
I'd love you to touch on that, as a practical tip that audience, I'm sure, would want to hear how that is even possible.
Trust me. I mean, I was talking to firms that work remotely. This was one thing that if I would say, I'll say, you know what, just find a way to incorporate fun. And what it means was, even though you're remote, and so one thing that came up big was plan for meetups, relationships and communication, right? Plan for meetups, maybe like regular events, even if you're remote, even if all the team is dispersed, if there's a possibility of a once a year physical, do it. That's something that came up. And then while you're working remotely, incorporate fun into the work. Come up with games, come up with challenges, come up with, things that make people excited about work.
Hold on there.
Yes.
I want everyone who listens to this podcast to go away with one tip on this area of fun.
Yeah.
One game or thing that can be done remotely, because I'm interested, because I'm going to implement this in my own business as well. And all ears, I really want to hear this.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, and it's good. The good thing is that a lot of us can even research on different games. One thing I heard people talk about was like maybe they had committees every
like on a regular period, maybe on Fridays, they will do something quirky. Maybe on Friday, you can talk about something that happened in your week that, made a big difference. You could show your pets, you can, show your family. There could be music. There could be, I had an example of maybe deliveries done to everyone's house. So, like TGIF. So deliveries came, so everybody got their delivery, and so even though we're remotely, we're engaged in something that unifies all of us.
Everyone.
Yes. So I've heard of people, having remote parties. So I guess there's so many activities that can be done online.
Yeah, so activities that you can capture
online
and online, and everybody kind of resonates around.
Yes. And it's not just about work. So it's not just about work. So the conversation can even start with just personal, like, okay, what happened where you are, or, today we're going to talk about this topic or that topic, or just how are you doing? We're just not work. So, which is contrary to it, because a lot of times when people work, it's about the work. They have a meeting, it's about the work. And it's like, no, because that's one of the ways you can ensure that there's still a connection. Otherwise, it's just about work.
And, I think, it's really interesting because in a sense, people don't associate the remote work environment with fun.
Yeah.
So let's assume for some organizations would use, let's say, Microsoft Teams as their primary technology for work interaction. Yeah. And that platform is only associated with work, right? Mm-hmm. And so the thought of having some sort of fun in that environment is really alien to a lot of people. But so it's really, really interesting. And I think
it's something that came up a lot. And the meaningful work. So work has to be meaningful, because what kept people engaged was work that was impactful, work that was important, work where they were learning. So the work has to really be meaningful. That was something that came up. But the strategies were around fun. I don't think there was a person who didn't mention it it just came up strongly. People wanted more than, the work, right? So meaning had to be there, but fun was a big way to make it more meaningful, right? That's something that came up. And then, of course, I've talked about personal factors in terms of strategy. There are individual differences. So those individual differences should be supported. When I say differences, from personalities to abilities. So providing some kind of guidelines and training to improve people's remote work effectiveness, right? Because remote work has a way to be effective. Offer well-being support. So things that help the individual is another set of strategies to support their individual differences, to support their individual circumstances. Like, how you used to have personal effectiveness training normally? No, personal effectiveness in remote work training, right? How to keep your space, how to ensure that your space is conducive, how to maintain your mental, your emotional well-being, because working alone can make you feel disconnected and isolated. So personal support, well-being support was something that really came in. And I've already spoken about the workspace standards.
Fantastic.
So if I was to say one, like I said, I would say people need to pick out what the insight is, I would say, for them. But we've talked about the fun being, that was a surprise.
It's now that you say it, it's actually not surprising, because you see this come up even when you're having meetings, right?
And things like that.
Yes, people want to express themselves, particularly when everyone is just remote and the only interaction is through an electronic portal like Teams.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so let's we're running to the 30-minute mark. Let's pivot to what are the key challenges that you still believe need to be addressed, perhaps with the infrastructure, the remote work infrastructure that currently exists. What is there any specific thing that you think needs to improve, or challenges that need to be addressed?
I think that in terms of challenges, it would still be, if you're in a developing country, definitely infrastructure, right? But one thing that we can all do with is public policy in terms of government intervention.
to actually support it. You have a few countries that have policies around, I would say remote work, because remote work has a culture of always on. Yeah.
Yes.
And we know that always on, whether we like it or not, for some personalities, and I say that not for all, because some people are okay with it. For some people, they need to separate work and so some countries, like you see France, you see Portugal, they have policies around when you can contact people, so that people don't have to be always on. Yeah. So I think government policy can definitely help. And I'm not talking about that aspect, but more of from a well-being perspective, so that people don't burn out, because working all the time can cause burnout. But that burnout is it's very much linked to engagement, because a lot of the research on engagement actually says burnout is the opposite of engagement. So when somebody is not engaged, there's lots of research to say that the opposite side of the spectrum from engagement is actually burnout.
I see.
Yes, it is. So why is it important to be engaged? And that's why I said it's a delicate and complex issue, because engagement, when you're enjoying the work, you're not burnt out.
Exactly.
But when you are not enjoying the work, it's not meaningful. You don't connect. There's stressors. It leads to burnout. So for some people, everybody is not in their dream job. Some people burnt out.
Now that you're just saying this, when you talked about government policy intervention, also it's just a thought that came to my mind. In a country, in third world countries, where a lot of the talent actually is domiciled for countries that are looking for, highly skilled talent that are not necessarily available in their own domains. Yeah. For example, countries can invest in infrastructure that supports remote work. I'll give you an example. In countries like Nigeria, power is a big deal. In South Africa, and these are countries that have high concentration of talent that is exported to the rest of the world. And so in those countries, if government, for example, can, as a matter of policy, subsidize things like solar panels, things that make them a lot more affordable, because that will really ensure that freelancers, for example, can be a lot more productive. And, the cost of their energies.
Can you confirm to me, because I've heard this before, is it like that the Yaba area has like Wi-Fi?
I'm not sure, but I wouldn't be surprised. Yes,
something like that. So if you have those hubs, even some of the strategies were actually relocated. When I mean relocated, like if there are hubs that people can use, that's definitely something. If that
correct, absolutely.
People that are working remotely, you can see that there needs to be an investment.
Yes.
In the infrastructure.
Correct.
And that's why you see people who are maybe more specialists in terms of their skill level. They make a lot of investments on their own part because of the work they do. You see a lot of people doing everything. I remember, like I gave you the example that clients they do checks beforehand. So part of their recruitment and selection process is that they would do a check of you remotely. They will test your internet. They'll come online with you. So a prerequisite for those jobs are that you already have sorted out those things. But we know that it means that the individual has to sort it out, right? And that's not a problem in developed countries, but it's a higher cost.
Correct.
Also brings us to another strategy which firms use definitely in Nigeria, which is subsidizing the cost. Companies actually give allowances for working remotely. I know it may not be, it's also done by other companies. I know companies who set up people, like they give you an allowance once you start to set up your home office. And then I know companies who give, we give allowances for internet data. Because, that's a cost, whether we like it or not. There's a huge cost that has shifted from the employer to the employee. So for me and for some companies, it's a way of redirecting those real estate costs into now. The real estate now is infrastructure, technology.
Exactly.
So you're just redirecting your cost to enable remote work. So companies need to deliberately enable their employees to work remotely by providing the infrastructure. I know that in certain countries, there's policies around you must provide the equipment, you must provide. So I think it depends on whether a person is a staff or a contractor. Of course, contractors, you don't provide equipment, but if it's a staff, you need to provide the equipment, you need to provide the infrastructure for them to work, because that is the work too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We're coming to the end of the podcast. We have our quick fire round. I'm just going to ask you 5 very, very quick one answer questions.
Yes.
Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Nights. Night.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Wow,
coffee gives me a headache.
I would have thought you were a coffee person.
Nah, I did it. I tried to be a coffee person, then I started getting headaches. So I realized I wasn't naturally coffee.
Yeah. That's just like my wife. My wife drinks Boca. She calls it coffee. I say Boca is just hot.
No. Green tea. Matcha green tea.
Okay, so what's the best piece of leadership advice you've ever received? Short.
Leadership is a journey.
Wow. I like that.
Yeah.
What's one leadership leader that you admire?
In Nigeria, Mitchell.
No, anywhere.
Oh,
okay. The industry chair.
Wow.
I'm sure he would love to.
My CEO for life.
Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
What's the last book that you read that left a lasting impact? Anything?
The last book I read that left a last impact, and I read a lot, but lasting impact, that won't be tough. Well, let me say, if it's lasting, let me go nonfiction.
Yes. Okay.
I will go nonfiction. The Kite Runner.
Interesting. Just tell us a little bit about that.
No, God, that would be like, it was just so well written. I don't know. It was written in the first person, and it was just, I don't know. I just felt I was immersed in the book. That's non-fiction. Wow. I am fiction, but I read a lot of non-fiction. But I would say that I don't know. I can't even really remember what the story was, but I just remember being immersed in it. It was just so well written. It was based in India or Bangladesh. I can't remember.
Fantastic.
Just
thank you so much, Adora Ikwuemesi. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I thought, we're around our time. Can you imagine? We can go on. And I'm really hoping you'll come back, because it's
yes.
Topic. So for those inspired with today's discussion, how can they find you? Where can they find you?
Okay.
If they want to get
LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a good place on social media. I don't know. I'm still trying to learn Twitter. I don't even think I've tweeted before.
Really?
Nah.
Really? I think you should.
Everyone tells me that, but when I just go there, I'm like, I'm not really sure. I like long to write. So maybe the tweets were just too short for me, right? I just need to say something more. So so LinkedIn, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can connect to me or follow me. I write a lot, so.
Okay, interesting. So please reach out to Adora on LinkedIn. She's the CEO and the founder of Kendor Consulting.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sure they can also reach you on the Kendor website.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So thank you for tuning in.
Yes,
Keep pushing the boundaries.
Yeah. Thank
Stay
you.
curious and continue striving for improvement.
Yes.
Until the next time, stay productive.
Thank you very much.
Making a big impact. Thank
All
you
right.
so much.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.